Okay, so good morning. Well, no, good evening, everyone. Oh, yes, of course. It's morning for me, evening for you guys. So nice to meet you, Elsa. Nice to meet you. Where's Elise? Elise was here somewhere. And William is an adult. That's okay. Nice to meet you too. I mean, hopefully you'll enjoy it too. So yeah, I'm Andrew, and I'm in Toronto, and I've been teaching for quite a while, and everyone's been changing to this online learning a lot. And what you guys are looking at now is Google Classroom, which I think most people know about Google Classroom. I'll just show it to you really, really quickly. And I have, I think, a pretty interesting lesson. I mean, the best thing about online, well, there are some really good advantages about learning online, especially with all the material we can bring in. But for tonight, I just want to show you like how we learn. This is a class which is meant to develop some reading, writing, and some thinking skills. And so basically what you see in front of you, this is Google Classroom. Most people will sign up. When they sign up, you know, I'll see all the students list. You don't have to sign up tonight, but if you want to sign up to go onto this thing, there's usually a class code. And the best way to talk to me, like there's two ways, as you guys know. You can talk through your mic. You can also talk through this chat. Hi, right? I keep this chat box open. So like it's always sort of running. You can chat to me, you can chat to each other, it doesn't matter. I just sort of look at it as we go along. So Elsa, you see the chat? Do you see me saying hi, Elsa? Hi, Elsa. You see that? Type there if you can see it. And then Elise, hi, can you see me? It's good if you try out the chat just so that it works. Oh, there's Mary. Hi, Mary. And William, I think, is one of the parents.
Oh, teacher.
Yeah. Hi. Do you see that I'm typing there? Does everyone see that there's a chat box? I'm typing in the hi there. I wanted you guys to try it, just like writing something in there so I can see it. Mary, if you know how to type in that chat box, you can type in there. Elsa, Elise. Anyway, I'll leave it open. It's available. It's the best way to reach me because I can always see it, you know? So what do we do in this class? Well, I'll show you. I think this will be kind of interesting. Basically, we're learning reading, writing, and thinking. And what are you going to learn at the end of the class? I always start with the assignment. We're going to read a short story, like a simple short story. And I'm going to ask you guys a couple questions. You've probably heard of this story before, Little Red Riding Hood, but you may not have heard of a new writer who teaches this story in an original way. We're going to read from this writer, Roald Dahl. Has anyone heard of Roald Dahl? He wrote some famous stories like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, James and the Giant Peach. By the end of this class, you're going to be able to answer these questions. It says Little Red Riding Hood, and then there's this word, APES. This is really the beginning of our course. These are instructions about how to write. So I'm asking you two questions. How would you describe the wolf? Bring some evidence from the story. Use APES. How would you describe Little Red Riding Hood? Bring evidence from the story. Use APES. What are we talking about this APES? The thing about this online learning is like, I end up teaching new stuff, maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes. 5 or 10 minutes of teaching. Most of the learning your ability comes from practicing. So right now it's like 8:15, say. All of the learning will probably be done by 8:20. And then you'll have a chance to practice it. What am I talking about, this APES? APES is an acronym. It's a way to write an answer. It doesn't matter what grade you're in. You guys are grades 7 and 8. I also teach classes grade 9, 10, grade 11, 12. We always start with this. Does anyone know what an open-ended question is? This is how you answer an open-ended question. There are 4 steps to answer an open-ended question. And if you guys understand what an open-ended question is, if you learn how to answer an open-ended question, it will help you a lot. Because a lot of questions you get in school are open-ended questions, and there's a specific way to answer them. That's what I'm asking you guys. 2 questions from this story we're going to read, a simple story, and I'm asking you 2 open-ended questions in this writing format. What is an open-ended question? Has anyone heard about that before? Can I show you guys 2 different questions? I wrote it very, very quickly. This is one of the things I really like about online, you know? I can switch very, very quickly and I can write and you guys can see it. Who can answer this question for me? Which city in Europe has the most people? I mean, I don't expect any of you guys to know. I could ask you, for instance, forget Europe, which city in China has the most people? Anybody know? Anybody want to guess? Oh, geez, do I even know? I have to ask Google. What do you think, Elsa? City in China has the most people? I'm gonna ask Google. Hey, Google, which city in China has the most people? Shanghai. Oh, I didn't know that. Okay. Shanghai has the most people. By the way, guys, you can totally listen. I'm hoping you're listening and stuff. But chat to me a little bit so that we can interact. So I know that you're there, you know? We have expression in my culture that like, well, basically it's that a student who is very, very shy can't learn. That's our expression. So you need to make sure you're not so shy. You need to make sure you're comfortable making some mistakes and trying a little bit and, you know, just chatting. Don't look at it as a test. None of these questions are tests. They're just conversations. I just need to find out, like, there's usually one student who's usually brave, and then other students become brave. The hardest part is finding the first one. And William, you're a parent, but you could be brave too if you wanted. All I want is someone to answer in the chat, you know, when I ask a question. Or if you don't feel like answering, you don't have to, but if you do answer it, it would be great. Even if you say, I don't know. Anyway, say we have this question, right? Say we have this question. Thanks, William. Which city in China has the most people, right? That's a question. Okay, I just looked it up on Google and the answer is Shanghai has the most people. This is what we call a closed-ended question. Closed. Why? There's a question and there's an answer. Here's the question. Here's the answer. Simple, simple. Maybe when you guys are in grade 3, grade 4, grade 5, they start asking, you know, closed-ended questions. What's your name? Where are you from? As you get a little bit older, they start asking a little bit more complicated questions, which have complicated answers. Well, what city in China would you like to visit? This is called open-ended question. Why? Well, there's more than one answer. There's more than one answer, so what matters is how you organize the answer. That's this APES. Imagine a conversation. Here's a question. What city in China would you like to visit? It says person number 1. Okay. Person number 2, what does person number 2 say? Well, I would like to visit Beijing. Person number 1 is, what's person number 1 gonna say? Person 1's gonna say, oh really, why? Why? In other words, when you give an answer, there needs to be some sort of proof. There needs to be some sort of explanation, some sort of evidence. And then person number 2 says, well, I want to visit all of the museums. And then person number 1 says, yeah, but why Beijing? Person number 2 says, there are many museums in Beijing, so it's a great choice for me. What I'm trying to show you guys here is imaginary conversation where people are thinking and having a discussion. That's APES. In other words, someone asks a question, the first thing you do is you answer it. Answer, there's the A. Then they want to understand your answer. You bring some proof, some information. And then they ask about the proof, and you explain it. That is what we practice in this class. For a lot of the class, believe it or not. The S part is just a summary, where you sort of repeat what you're saying in the end. You know, person 1 would say, oh, Beijing seems like a great place for you. Person 2 is like, yeah, that's my city of choice. You don't have to memorize this. You just have to understand it a little bit generally. All you have to understand is you have this almost this pattern, A, P, E, S. And you can see these letters, A, and then P, and then E, and then S. Together it spells apes. That's why this picture shows a picture of an ape. There he is, small banana. They usually eat a lot of bananas. I don't know much about apes. But what they show here is how to answer an open-ended question. Answer the question with a complete sentence. You answer the question. You bring in some proof. You explain the proof, how it shows your answer. And then you summarize it. Seems easy, right? The ideas are not that hard. The practicing is how you learn it. APES, ta-da, fantastic. That was a great lesson. No, I'm just kidding. That was just the learning part. So now, do you guys understand the question at least a little bit? How would you describe the wolf? Bring evidence from the story, use APES. That means when you answer the question, answer, prove, explain, summarize. Tonight I'll answer it. I'll show you guys how to do it. How would you describe Little Red Riding Hood? Bring evidence from the story, use APES. What we practice in the beginning is how to answer these questions. And then we can ask many, many interesting questions. So what is it that we do in the class? Well, we read a lot of stories. Sometimes we read poems, sometimes we read stories. I usually start with this very, very famous author. His name is Roald Dahl. Has anyone heard the story Little Red Riding Hood, by the way? You'll see why I like this guy, why he's a really, really interesting writer. Cody, you've never heard of Little Red Riding Hood? Cody, you get the prize for answering first. Sorry, you don't have to be sorry. Elsa, you heard of Little Red Riding Hood? Elise, you heard of Little Red Riding Hood? William, you heard of Little Red Riding Hood? Little Red Riding Hood is the story they tell kids. It's a super, super simple story. I want to start. Now, we're not going to study. It's your favorite story? Oh, okay, amazing. See that, everyone? It's William's favorite story. So it's a popular story for some people. This is Little Red Riding Hood, okay? It's like a kid's story. It's for kids younger than you. I only want to talk about this story very, very briefly because what we're going to do tonight is we're going to study the way another writer teaches this story. And once you see the way the other writer teaches it, You'll see why Roald Dahl is so interesting. You have heard of it, Cody? Okay, good. Little Red Riding Hood, super, super simple story. I thought I'd play a little bit of it, and then I just wanted to read it very, very quickly. Remember, this is not the story we're going to study, but this is just the basis. You'll see it's a kid's story. The music is very fun. It's very, very harmless. Let me just play it for a second.
There lived a little girl. Once upon a time, there lived a little girl. This girl wore a red riding hood at all times. That's why everybody used to call her Little Red Riding Hood. Darling! Yes, Mummy? You know your grandmother is ill. Would you take her the cookies I baked and the fresh herbs I picked from the woods? Of course, Mummy, I will. The little girl, with her Red Riding Hood as always, started her journey to her grandmother's house. Do not leave the road in the bunny forest, sweetheart, said her mother as she was leaving. Little Red Riding Hood started walking in the forest while joyously singing songs. I wonder why they call it the bunny forest. I haven't seen any bunnies along the way. Little Red Riding Hood came to a road filled with flowers. There were all kinds of colored flowers. I should pick some flowers for my grandmother.
Okay, do you see how it's a kid's story? It's for kids younger than you. I mean, it's about a nice story about this girl who's going to go visit her grandmother. And along the way, she's going to meet a wolf. I thought we would read the story really quickly. Remember, we're not studying this one. We're going to study how this writer, Roald Dahl, tells the story. But to really enjoy him, you need to know the Little Red Riding Hood. Now I need some sort of volunteer. Someone who's brave enough to read this story. This is Little Red Riding Hood. Super, super simple story for kids younger than you. Does anyone feel like reading it? Cody, you going to read this thing? Oh, Elise is going to read this thing. We have a volunteer. Okay, go ahead.
Little Red Riding Hood lived in a wood with her mother. One day, Little Red Riding Hood went to visit her granny. She had a nice cake in her basket. On her way, Little Red Riding Hood met a wolf. Hello, said the wolf. Where are you going? I'm going to see my grandmother. She lives in a house behind those trees. The wolf ran to Granny's house and ate Granny up. He got into Granny's bed. A little later, Little Red Riding Hood reached the house. She looked at the wolf. Granny, what big eyes you have. All the better to see you with, said the wolf. Granny, what big ears you have. All the better to hear you with, said the wolf. Granny, what big nose you have. All the better to smell of you, said the wolf. Granny, what big teeth you have. All the better to eat you with, shouted the wolf. A woodcutter was in the wood. He heard a loud scream and ran to the house. The woodcutter hit the wolf over the head. The wolf opened his mouth wide and shouted, and Granny jumped out. The wolf ran away, and Little Red Riding Hood never saw the wolf again.
The end, right? Very good. Good reading. And
Thank you.
Yeah, little kids like this story. It has a happy ending. And you know, everyone is happy in the end. And there's sort of a nice lesson. I mean, this movie is 8 minutes long, so I didn't want to show you the whole thing. But basically, it's the same thing which Elise was saying. She meets this wolf. The wolf is cute. Like, everyone is cute in the story. The mushrooms are cute. The wolf is cute. The flowers are cute. Little Red Riding Hood is cute. She meets this wolf who wants to trick her. She meets this huntsman who's going to help her. She goes along her way, la, la, la. She sees the wolf in bed. You know, this wolf like wants to eat her, but you know, this wolf looks adorable anyway. Everything is adorable. And at the end, you know, she has this conversation with the wolf. And then finally, the huntsman comes in, kills the wolf. Whoops. The one part with showing these movies I forgot is there's all these commercials all the time. Sorry, I have to turn it on for a second, but I won't turn on the sound. Sorry. Don't worry about Grammarly. At the end, she eats with her grandma. Just let me play the end for a second.
Riding Hood had brought for her. Boiled the healthy herbs to make a cup of tea and instantly got well. Little Red Riding Hood promised her grandmother that she will never ever fall into the words of a bad wolf again. Little Red Riding Hood was walking in the forest once again, singing along merrily, as she ran into the same wolf again. The wolf was punished by the hunter to clean the forest, and he was very ashamed about what he did when he saw the Little Red Riding Hood. The bunny forest became full of joy, bunnies and flowers, like it was once before.
The end, right? And you can imagine little kids are like, yay, and they have very, very nice sleeps and happy dreams and all those things, fine. So there's this writer named Roald Dahl, okay? He was from Wales. He was quite a very famous writer. He read these stories and he said, blech, I don't want stories where these characters are so simple, where everything ends happy, happy, happy. And he came up with these new type of stories. He takes Little Red Riding Hood and he writes his own story about it. That's what we study in the course. What is it that we're trying to talk about? We're going to read this story. And then we're going to ask ourselves these questions. How do you describe the wolf? Bring evidence from the story. Use this APES. How do you describe Little Red Riding Hood? Bring evidence from the story. Use APES. A lot of what we do in this class is we learn about characters. We learn how to understand them. We learn all the hints which the writer puts in the story about characters. We're going to read the Roald Dahl story, Little Red Riding Hood. It's actually like a poem. And then we're going to try to answer these questions. I might let you guys actually try it if you feel interested and confident enough to actually try to answer them. I'm also going to show you how to answer them. So by the end of tonight, you'll know this APES thing. Fine. Little Red Riding Hood, Roald Dahl style. You probably will not believe that this guy has this type of imagination. We need someone else to read it. It's not that long, a story, maybe a page and a half. And I even wrote this APES stuff at the bottom. Elise already read. Do we have anyone else who feels brave enough to read? You're not, in our class, you're not really competing with each other, but you can learn from each other. So you don't have to worry if you read as well as Elise. It's not a competition. You just need to read a little bit to feel, confident. And if you're afraid to make some mistakes, make some mistakes. Good to make some mistakes in the beginning. Someone could call it Little Red Riding Wood. There, that's a mistake. And then I'll say, no, it's Hood. And then you'll be like, okay. Who wants to try? Go, Cody, let's do it, my friend. You feeling brave enough? Oh, by the way, the one rule in this class, the actual rule, is the word pass. PASS. If I ask someone to read and all those things and you don't want to do it, you never actually have to do it. You can always just pass. But if you feel like doing it, that's great. Okay, who's here? A new student? Yo-Yo? Welcome, welcome.
Yes, thank you.
You're right on time. We're reading a story and we're learning how to write. We're learning how to write short answer questions.
Oh.
Elise, I think you're going to volunteer to read again. Is that why you're raising your hand?
Yeah.
Amazing. I will totally let you if Cody passes. We're waiting on Cody though. Are you going to try to read, Cody? If not, use the magic word pass, he says. Okay, fine, no problem. All right, let's read this thing. I'll interrupt a little bit as you read it. It's a little bit more complicated, and then we'll watch the movie, and then we'll answer the question. All right, go ahead, Elise.
As soon as Wolf began to feel that he would like a decent meal, he went and knocked on Grandma's door. When Grandma opened it, she saw the sharp white teeth, the horrid grin, and Wolfie said, "May I come in?" Poor Grandmama was terrified. "He was going to eat me up," she cried. And she was absolutely right. He ate her up in one big bite.
Sorry, one sec. You see this story starts off a little bit more aggressive. Remember, what are we looking for in the end? we're looking for being able to answer this question. How do you describe the wolf? Bring evidence from the story. How do you describe Little Red Riding Hood? Bring evidence from the story. This story starts off way faster. As soon as the wolf wants to eat something, he knocks on Grandma's door. He calls her Grandma Ma, the writer, just for fun. Horrid means horrible. Grandma stares at the wolf, is absolutely horrified. She thinks he's going to eat her, and of course he does. All right, keep on going, Elise. You're doing great.
But Grandmama was small and tough, and Wolfie wailed, "That's not enough. I haven't yet begun to feel that I have had a decent meal." He ran around the kitchen yelping, "I've got to have a second helping," then added with a frightful leer, "I'm therefore going to wait right here till little Miss Red Riding Hood comes home from walking in the wood." He quickly put on Grandma's clothes. Of course, he hadn't eaten those. He dressed himself in coat and hat. He put on shoes, and after that, he even brushed and curled his hair. Then he sat himself in Grandma's chair.
Good. Yo-Yo, you had a question?
No, I just want to volunteer to read it.
Oh, excellent. I'll give you a chance to read. Yeah, for sure. The second part of the story, Elise, you also did a great job. The second part of the story, right? He eats the grandma. Wailed is like to cry. You'll see a lot of the verbs, but he says that's not enough. I got to eat something else. I'm waiting for Little Red Riding Hood. And so he puts on grandma's clothes. He even, curls his hair. It's supposed to be a little bit funny. He brushes and curls his hair and he sits himself in grandma's chair. Okay, go ahead, Yo-Yo. You can read a bit.
Okay. In came the little girl in red. She stopped. She stared, and then she said, What great big ears you have, Grandma. All the better to hear you with." The wolf replied. "What great big eyes you have, Grandma," said Little Red Riding Hood. "All the better to see you with." The wolf replied. He sat there watching her and smiled. He thought, I'm going to eat this child. Compared with her old grandmama, she's going to taste like caviar.
Yeah, so these lines from the story are from the original Little Red Riding Hood, like, what great big ears you have, what great big eyes you have. It's the same conversation between grandma and the wolf. And the wolf is thinking, once I eat grandma, she's going to taste like caviar. Caviar is like, well, I don't know if you guys have had caviar before. It's reasonably delicious. Caviar, it's like fish eggs, medium expensive, delicious, kind of delicious. Anyway, that's what the wolf is thinking. The grandma didn't taste delicious. After I eat Little Red Riding Hood, she'll be delicious. Okay, now watch this. Watch the way the story changes fast. Okay, go, Yo-Yo.
Then Little Red Riding Hood said, But Grandma, what a lovely, great, big, furry coat you have on. That's wrong, cried Wolf. Have you forgot to tell me what big teeth I've got? Well, no matter what you say, I'm going to eat you anyway. The small girl smiles. One eyelid flickers. She whips a pistol from her knickers. She aims it at the creature's head, and bang, bang, bang. She shoots him dead. A few weeks later, in the wood, I came across Miss Riding Hood. But what a change! No cloak of red, no silly hood upon her head. She said, Hello, and do please note my lovely furry wolfskin coat.
Do you guys get it? Do you get what happens in the story? Roll doll.
Yeah.
What happens?
So technically, Little Red Riding Hood killed the wolf instead of the hunter, which killed the wolf, and then took out the wolf skin and made it into a coat.
Right. So Roald Dahl has this wild sense of humor. He's a wild writer, very, very creative. He doesn't like it when characters are just like taken care of. When you're a kid, sometimes you like, the idea a huntsman comes in and takes care of you. Now he's telling stories where the characters, they're a bit more active. So this Little Red Riding Hood, she's been planning it all along. Now, how do we study characters? What is our goal tonight, right? Our goal is to use this APES writing to answer these questions. How do you describe the wolf? Bring evidence from the story. How would you describe Little Red Riding Hood? Bring evidence from the story. I want to show you guys the movie, which plays, the story again. But before we do that, I wanted to ask one more thing. How do we describe characters? What we're looking for is the way the writer teaches us about the character. Has anyone ever heard of this word? It's the longest word you'll read about tonight. Has anyone ever heard of that word? Characterization. It's really, really interesting. Sometimes I teach this in the first course. Sometimes I teach it in the second course, second class. Like I told you guys, most of the learning is in the first 5 minutes, but tonight I organize it a bit differently. I want to teach one other small thing. How do you find information about a character in the story? Sometimes you're kind of like a detective. Let me explain it for a second. You've got this word called characterization. I want to explain that for a second and then go back to the story. So here, if you look at our class, here's the Roald Dahl stories. Here is this learning about characterization. And here is the assignment with this APES. And when you click on it, like if you clicked on this, it's got all the material which we're going to do in the class, right? It's got the story, it's got the movies. You click on this, it's got the assignment we're going to do, plus that worksheet, APES. This worksheet is this, same thing. Sorry. And then if you click on this, it's got some of the things that we study, this characterization. I want to play this thing for a second. Again, you don't have to memorize it. I don't think there's anything in this course which I ask you to memorize. Just try to understand the general ideas. You'll learn it by practicing it. Here's this thing called characterization, okay? I'm going to play this really, really quickly. 2-minute video.
As we read fiction, we come to better understand the characters. Characterization is the process by which the writer reveals the personality of a character. This is done in 2 ways. Direct characterization is when the writer directly describes the personality and traits of a character. Indirect characterization shows things that reveal the personality of a character. Because the author hasn't directly told us something, we have to think carefully and make inferences.
Okay, there are 2 things you need to know from this video. 1, there's this word called characterization. What does it mean? Characterization, you study it in more detail in high school, but basically characterization, we're looking at the way the writer who writes the story tells us about the characters. There are 2 ways that the writer will tell us. That's the second thing you have to know. Oh, I made a mistake. You need to know 3 things. First, you need to know this word characterization, what it means. It means like clues. Clues we're looking at in the story, how we learn about a character. There are 2 ways which we learn about a character. The writer will sometimes tell us who a character is. That's the easiest one. In other words, we have this story. It could be something like a writer could say, Little Red Riding Hood was a very nice girl. The wolf was an angry wolf. This is one way we learn about the character, right? The author tells us. He says who she is. She was a nice girl. He says who he is. He was an angry wolf. This is what we call direct. You don't have to memorize this. You just have to sort of listen a little bit. The part which is really, really interesting is the other way. The other way we learn about the character is called indirect. And what we're trying to do when we study stories are to learn these type of hints. Indirect means like this. You would have a sentence like this. Little Red Riding Hood visited her grandmother each morning and brought cookies. You read this sentence, the writer, in this case me, doesn't say who Little Red Riding Hood is, doesn't say what type of girl she is, but what he does is he writes something about the way she acts. We look at the story, we read it, and we say, we don't know for sure, but a girl like this seems to be what? She seems to be kind, or she seems to be generous. That's how we learn about the character. That's called indirect. And those are the tools we have to learn about the character. When I'm asking you guys this assignment, how do you describe the wolf? Bring evidence from the story. Well, we're going to look for clues. We're going to look at the way the wolf acts, the way the wolf thinks. Same thing with Little Red Riding Hood. That's what we mean by characterization. And again, you don't have to memorize that. Just know that this is one of the tools we have to study writing. So the second part of the video, the guy is going to tell us, how do we do this characterization the other way? That's what I wanted to show you very quickly.
We can use a simple trick to help us better understand indirect characterization. When you want to better understand a character, use the acronym STEAL to help you. S stands for speech. Think about what the character says and how the character speaks. T stands for thoughts. Consider the character's personal thoughts and think about how the character is feeling. E stands for effect on others. Think about the character's effect on other people. How do others feel or react in response to the character? A stands for actions. What does the character do? And how does the character behave? L stands for looks. What does the character look like? And how does the character dress? Let's recap. When the author directly tells you something about the character, that is direct characterization. When you need to make an inference about a character, that is called indirect characterization. Remember to think STEAL. STEAL works not only in books, but when you're watching a movie or a play. So the next time you're reading a good book, remember to think STEAL.
I mean, not a bad video, not such a great one, but good enough to introduce this idea of characterization. So we're going back to the story, which Elise and Yo-Yo read quite well. How do we characterize these people? That's what I wanted to ask. How would you describe the wolf? Bring evidence from the story, use APES format. I'm going to take this question here. I'm going to answer it for you guys, or hopefully together. So what would happen is I would give this type of assignment. I would ask this question. Everyone would answer it in Google Docs. And then the good thing is we can show it in class, and you don't usually show who is writing which assignment. So like your names are protected, you know, but you get to compare the assignments. So we get to see, you know, how everyone writes. And that's how I get to make sure that everyone learns it. You practice it a couple times and you can learn it. How would you describe the wolf? Bring the evidence from the story. We go back to the story super, super, super quickly. Let's figure out how we describe this wolf. As soon as Wolf began to feel that he would like a decent meal, he went and knocked on Grandma's door. When Grandma opened it, she saw the sharp white teeth, the horrid grin, and Wolfie cried, "May I come in?" Poor Grandmama was terrified. "He's going to eat me up," she cried, and she was absolutely right. He ate her up in one big bite. But Grandmama was small and tough, and Wolfie wailed, "That's not enough. I haven't yet begun to feel that I would like a decent meal." He ran around the kitchen yelping, "I've got to have a second helping," then added with a frightful leer, I'm therefore going to wait right here." Anyone want to take a guess? How do you characterize the wolf? Roald Dahl doesn't say that the wolf is this or the wolf is that. He shows it. So you have to look at what the wolf says, or the way the wolf thinks, or the way the wolf acts, or the effect that the wolf has on other people. You can choose any of those things. Okay, good, Elise. Elise says horrifying. That's a great verb. Well, actually, it's used as an adjective, but we'll talk about grammar another day. Greedy. Okay, good. Greedy is another one. So how do we answer this question? So for me, of course, it doesn't matter. You could say horrifying. You could say greedy. What matters is following this APES. So how do you do this thing? The first thing you do is you answer the question. You'd say something like, one can characterize the wolf as greedy. And if you were in grade, 3 or 4, that would be enough for your teacher, right? But grade 7 and 8, we're doing this APES. So what you need to do is you bring in some sort of proof. Did you have any ideas? Why were you thinking that the wolf might be greedy? You had some idea, Cody? You were on the right track. Horrifying would be good too. I'm just choosing this example. Why would we say that he's greedy? Where's the evidence in the story? Because his thought's good. What thought? What we usually do is we try to take something from the story. Well, he's like, I've got to have a second helping. He already ate the grandma. This is not a true story, by the way, obviously. No nightmares in this story. He says, I'm going to have a second helping. Okay, so we take that from the story. One can characterize the wolf as greedy. Why? He ate the grandma and then went around saying something like, I've got to have a second helping. Good. That's what we mean by proof. The proof means you bring in some evidence from the story. The part students have trouble with in the beginning is the third part, which is this E. Well, what are you supposed to do? What you're supposed to do is this. You explain the connection. Here's the word greedy. Here's the word here's the proof that you brought in. How does this show that he's greedy, right? Most of us sort of have a sense of it, but what you need to do is explain it. You need to explain this relationship because this is where your opinion is coming in, right? Based on this evidence. So you say something like, well, he already ate someone and yet he's going around saying he needs another helping. Like he seems to have this crazy appetite. So you might say something like that. Even though he ate the grandma, he demonstrates an incredible appetite. Or you could say an excessive means too much, appetite. That's the E. And then what do you say at the end? The S is pretty much repeating what it says in the beginning. So based on his actions, wolf seems to be quite greedy. That's how you do it. That's APES, and this is characterization. And Cody, you got it right away, right? Greedy is one thing. Or you could say he's horrifying, right? One can characterize right. Good, Yo-Yo. Even though he ate the grandma, he wanted to eat more. He decided to eat Little Red Riding Hood. This demonstrates that he's a greedy person. Yeah, good. Good. One can characterize the wolf as horrifying, right? How? He goes into the grandma's house and she's automatically freaking out. What does she say? Something like, where was it? He's going to eat me up, she cried, or she was terrified. He's going to eat me up, she cried. The wolf seems to have a terrible effect on people. That would be the EP part. That would be the proof part. Based on the way he scares people, one can suggest that he is horrifying. The thing is, my friends, it looks like writing, and it is writing, but it's also thinking, right? What is your teacher, in this case, me, but your teacher in class too, why do they give you these writing questions? Because they want to help you practice thinking. And thinking means organizing your thoughts, right? Organizing ideas. The idea that you can answer a question and then you have to bring some proof. And then you have to show the relationship. And what I was trying to show you is that's how we answer questions in real life. That's why I started with this story, you know, this question, what city in China would you like to visit? Where you answer the question and then the next person wants to know why, and then you tell them why and they want to understand the connection. That's why writing classes and thinking classes are connected, right? We're doing a writing class, but we're also trying to practice and develop thinking skills, which I can see already some of you guys have. I don't think it will be too hard. This is the foundation, right? So I could ask you guys the second question. How would you describe Little Red Riding Hood? She's different, right? She's not the Little Red Riding Hood from the first story. She's, well, wild, we'll say. She doesn't get afraid or anything. Are you saying use the APES? Yeah, do you know what the APES means now? So it's kind of interesting in one class, like we can learn very, very quickly. And most of the learning happens with practice. So what would happen is like at the beginning of the second class, whoever had signed up and, you know, did the answers and all those things, I would click on, maybe I could show you another classes. Well, I don't know if it's so important. I could show you another classes, but basically what happens is everyone answers it. And then you can see all the answers, but you don't see who did what answer. Like I can see who did what answer, but you guys don't. What you'll see are the different answers. And then we get to compare. Here, let me find it really, really quickly. I wasn't planning on showing it, but I'll just show you what another class could look like fast. If you don't mind, 1 second. I just want to show you like another class just so you see what it might look like. Go faster. Good one. I need to find one where people have answered in the class. No, not that one. Sorry, I'll do one more guess, and if I can't find it, I'll do another one. Okay, look. This is what we would see in class. 12 people answered, right? Okay. So I can see who answered which one, but when we do it in class, when I present it, I give everyone a mark, then I skip over the marks, say, and what we can do is look at the way different people answered it, right? For instance, this one, someone answers this question, right? A student has a good answer, very intelligent. He dresses up the grandmother, which makes her but Red Riding Hood figured it out. But you wouldn't get high marks because you didn't follow the APES. Or someone would say, I would describe the wolf as intelligent. So what happens is we learn from each other. Some students follow the APES right away. Some of them don't understand it right away, but you learn through practice. So see, these are the comments I would give another student. Yes, good answer, but use APES for higher marks. So in the beginning, you're protected, right? Like, I know who did this, but when I show it, I don't show who does it because it doesn't matter. The point is that we learn from each other. In this class, you're not competing with each other, but you are comparing, right? You can learn from each other. Anyway, so that's the question in the end. How do you describe Little Red Riding Hood? Bring evidence from a story. Well, anyone have any idea how you would describe Little Red Riding Hood? Anyone have any adjectives? I mean, are you guys impressed by her? Are you horrified by her? Do you look up to her? You know, anyone have an adjective? We'll build vocabulary too, you know. There's millions of adjectives to describe people. And
Maybe brave.
yeah, I think she's brave. She's also deceptive. You know, we get to, one of the really interesting things about the class is we start to study people, the way they behave. It's kind of interesting. If you actually think about it, if we read this again, which we might review next week, she planned the thing the whole time, right? She comes in there pretending like she's terrified and all those things, except she's had a gun the whole time. She's quite a clever girl, right? And also fearless. And also, people have said she's crazy before. I mean, she does skin the wolf, which is a little bit crazy. It doesn't matter how you answer. What matters is you follow the APES. And what you'll find really interesting is people see it differently. Like if I went back to the class one here, well, I closed it already. Some people say she's intelligent. Some people say she's wild. That's where it gets interesting, because you notice people think a little bit differently. All right, my friends. Well, just to summarize, that was not even an hour. Like our classes, I believe, are an hour and a half, I think. I have to double check with Flora if that's what we're doing, but I think so. In an hour and a half, what we tend to do is we read 1 or 2 stories. We watch 1 or 2 movies. We learn, how to analyze a story, and we practice some writing. And then I give you guys some homework, which is usually this type of homework, 10 or 15 minutes to start. Shouldn't take you too long, and you'll get better at it very, very quickly. And then we'll start asking more complicated questions. In a couple of weeks, we would ask things like, well, how do you compare the 2 of them? And we learn how to write more complicated writing. But that's in the future. So that's my introduction, my friends. For those of you who plan to join, very much look forward to seeing you guys. And thanks so much for listening, and hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you.